You're not exactly a priority right now, my dad texted as I sat alone at my promotion dinner. 4 hours later, my cousin posted, "Family night out for the real success story." It was my sister. She bought a jet ski. I paid the $2,500 bill, went home, and terminated the mortgage payments I'd been covering for 2 years. Then I left a note on their door, let her pay it. By morning, I had 21 missed calls. I, 32M, had been carrying my family's mortgage for 2 years, thinking it was temporary help during Dad's rough patch. That Thursday night, sitting alone at Romano's with a bottle of champagne I'd ordered to celebrate my promotion to senior project manager, I realized just how wrong I'd been. The text came at 7:47 p.m., right as the waiter asked if I was still waiting for someone. Dad's message was short and brutal. "You're not exactly a priority right now. Family emergency with your sister. Rain check on dinner." I told the waiter I'd be dining alone and tried to focus on my achievement. The promotion meant a 40% salary increase and recognition for the renewable energy project I'd led for 18 months. But the empty chair across from me felt like a monument to every missed birthday, graduation, and milestone where work or my sister's latest crisis had taken precedence. 4 hours later, scrolling through Instagram while finishing my second glass of wine at home, I saw it. My cousin had posted a video with the caption, "Family night out for the real success story." The camera panned across our local upscale steakhouse's patio, showing my parents, sister, aunt, uncle, and both cousins raising glasses in celebration. My sister stood in the center, beaming as she held up her phone, displaying photos of a brand new jet ski. The comments were flowing in with congratulations and heart emojis. My aunt had written, "So proud of our water sports queen." Dad had liked every single comment. I sat there staring at my phone, trying to process what I was seeing. While I'd eaten alone after being told I wasn't a priority, they'd been celebrating my sister's impulse purchase of recreational equipment. The same sister who'd never held a job longer than 6 months. The same sister whose emergencies had cost me thousands over the years. The mortgage payments I'd been covering flashed through my mind like a depressing slideshow. 24 payments of $2,100 each, plus the occasional extra $100 when property taxes came due. $50,000 I'd quietly transferred to keep their house from foreclosure, while Dad claimed his construction business was just going through a temporary slowdown. I pulled up my banking app and calculated the total. The number made my stomach turn. I'd essentially bought my sister's jet ski and funded dozens of family dinners I wasn't invited to. The waiter approached with the check. The promotion dinner I'd planned to share with family had cost me $127 for one person. I paid with my credit card and left a generous tip, thinking about how this moment crystallized everything wrong with my family dynamic. Driving home, I made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. I called my mortgage servicer's automated line and navigated to the payment options. The system cheerfully informed me that autopay could be canceled at any time with a simple confirmation code. I canceled it. Then I sat in my car outside their house at midnight, writing a note on the back of my promotion announcement letter. The irony wasn't lost on me. Using news of my success to deliver news of their impending problem. "Dad, saw the family celebration tonight. Looks like everyone had a great time. Since I'm not exactly a priority right now, I figured you wouldn't mind handling your own priorities. The mortgage payment automation has been canceled effective immediately. Let her pay it. Congratulations on the jet ski. Your son who got promoted today?" I slipped it under their door and drove home, feeling simultaneously sick and liberated. Friday morning arrived with a symphony of buzzing notifications. My phone showed 21 missed calls by 8 a.m., along with dozens of text messages that started apologetic and quickly turned desperate. Dad's first voicemail was recorded at 6:23 a.m., probably right after he found the note. His voice was shaky as he explained they'd tried to call me last night, but I hadn't answered. He said they'd wanted to include me, but thought I'd be tired after work. The story kept changing with each message. By the third voicemail, his tone had shifted to panic. The mortgage payment was due Monday. They didn't have the money. This would ruin their credit and cost them the house. Mom called next, crying through her explanation about how Dad had been stressed and made a mistake. She said they'd planned to celebrate with me separately, that they'd never meant to hurt my feelings. She begged me to call back and talk through this like adults. My sister's messages started around 7 a.m. Her first text was angry, calling me petty and vindictive for throwing a tantrum over a dinner. But by her fifth message, the tone had completely changed. She offered to sell the jet ski, promised to get a job, swore she'd pay me back every penny I'd spend on them. The avalanche of communication continued throughout the day. Cousins texted asking what had happened. My aunt called to mediate, suggesting we all sit down for a family meeting. Uncle left a voicemail about how families stick together through disagreements. I turned off my phone and went to work. My promotion had officially kicked in that Friday, which meant my first day with an office instead of a cubicle. I spent the morning arranging my new space and attending meetings about upcoming projects. Having a door I could close felt symbolic of the boundary I'd finally drawn with my family. Around lunch, I turned my phone back on to find 47 new messages and 12 additional missed calls. Dad had apparently driven to my apartment building and convinced the manager to call my unit. When I didn't answer, he'd left a note on my door asking me to please call him back. I drove home during lunch to find Dad's truck parked outside my building. He was sitting on the front steps, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. When he saw me approaching, he stood up quickly and started talking before I'd even gotten out of my car. He told me he was sorry, that the dinner celebration had been Mom's idea to cheer up my sister after she'd had a rough week. He claimed they'd planned to take me out separately to properly celebrate my promotion. He said he'd been handling too many things at once and had sent that text without thinking. I listened without interrupting as he explained their financial situation. The construction business was worse than he'd admitted. They'd been behind on multiple payments, not just the mortgage. My monthly contributions had been the only thing keeping them afloat, but he'd been too proud to tell me how desperate things had gotten. He offered to sign a formal loan agreement with interest and a payment schedule. He promised to prioritize family time with me. He even suggested I could stay in their guest room rent-free if I continued helping with the mortgage. I told him I needed time to think and asked him to leave. He hugged me before getting in his truck, telling me he loved me and knew we could work this out. But I'd already made up my mind. Update 1. Saturday morning, I called a family meeting. I told everyone to meet at Dad's house at 2 p.m., saying I had something important to discuss about moving forward. They all showed up early. My sister had clearly been crying, and Mom kept touching my arm and asking if I was okay. Dad had prepared a PowerPoint presentation on his laptop showing a detailed repayment plan. I let them present their case first. Dad went through his slides explaining how they'd pay me back $500 monthly starting in January, once his business picked up after the holidays. Mom talked about how family relationships were more important than money and how we could all learn from this misunderstanding. My sister apologized for the jet ski purchase, admitting she'd been impulsive and hadn't considered how it might look. She said she'd gotten caught up in the excitement of finally having something nice and hadn't thought about my feelings. She promised to sell it immediately and give me the proceeds. Then it was my turn to speak. I thanked them for their apologies and told them I understood everyone's perspective. I said I appreciated Dad's repayment plan and my sister's offer to sell the jet ski. I acknowledged that families go through rough patches and need to support each other. Then I told them I was moving to Seattle. The promotion had come with an opportunity to lead a new regional office, something I'd been considering for months but hadn't mentioned to anyone. The position came with a relocation package, a company car, and a salary increase that would nearly double my current income. I explained that I'd been feeling stuck in my current life, caught between wanting to help family and needing to build my own future. Thursday night's dinner had crystallized something I'd been avoiding. I'd been living for everyone else's priorities while putting my own dreams on hold. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom was the first to speak, asking when I'd made this decision and why I hadn't discussed it with them first. I told her I'd been thinking about it for months, but Thursday night had made the choice clear. Dad asked about the mortgage payments, and I could see the exact moment he realized what my moving meant. I explained that I'd be unable to continue supporting their household expenses from across the country. My sister accused me of using the Seattle job as an excuse to abandon the family, claiming I was punishing everyone for one mistake. I reminded her that Thursday wasn't one mistake. It was the culmination of years of being treated as a financial resource rather than a family member. I gave them 2 months' notice. I'd continue the mortgage payments through December to give them time to figure out alternative arrangements. After that, they'd need to manage their finances independently. Update 2. The 2 months that followed were the longest and most emotionally draining of my life. Dad threw himself into salvaging his business with an intensity one hadn't seen in years. He started bidding on smaller jobs he could complete quickly, working weekends, and even partnering with other contractors to take on bigger projects. Mom got a part-time job at a local retail store, her first employment in over a decade. She seemed energized by having her own income and purpose outside the house, though she frequently mentioned how much she missed our old family dynamic. My sister surprised everyone by not only selling the jet ski, but also getting hired at a marketing firm. She moved back home to save money and started contributing to household expenses for the first time in her adult life. But the family gatherings became tense affairs filled with pointed comments and uncomfortable silences. Every conversation seemed to circle back to my abandonment and the financial pressure my departure was creating. 3 weeks before my planned move, Dad suffered a minor heart attack. I got the call from Mom at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. She was crying and barely coherent, explaining that Dad had collapsed while working on a bathroom renovation. The paramedics said it was stress-related and not immediately life-threatening, but he'd need surgery and weeks of recovery. I drove straight to the hospital and found my family clustered in the cardiac unit waiting room. My sister looked at me with an expression that clearly communicated this was somehow my fault. Uncle pulled me aside and suggested that maybe now wasn't the time to be making dramatic life changes. But sitting there in that sterile hospital room, watching Dad sleep with monitors beeping around him, I realized something important. His stress hadn't started when I canceled the mortgage payments. It had been building for years while he tried to maintain a lifestyle his income couldn't support, taking handouts from his son instead of making the difficult decisions that might have prevented this crisis. I spent the next week helping coordinate Dad's care and business obligations. His partner in the construction company was willing to keep things running short-term, but they needed someone to handle administrative duties Dad had been managing. My sister stepped up in a way that shocked everyone. She took vacation time from her new job to learn Dad's bookkeeping system and started making calls to clients about project delays. She organized payment schedules, renegotiated deadlines, and even landed 2 new small contracts by the end of the week. During one of our late-night shifts at the hospital, she and I had the most honest conversation we'd had in years. She admitted she'd been jealous of my success and had felt entitled to family support because she'd never figured out how to build her own stability. She said watching Dad in the hospital had made her realize she needed to grow up and contribute rather than just consume. I told her I was proud of how she'd handled the business crisis and that I'd never intended to punish the family, just to establish boundaries that would help everyone become more self-sufficient. By the time Dad was released from the hospital 2 weeks later, something fundamental had shifted in our family dynamic. He was under strict orders to reduce stress and work shorter hours. Mom's part-time job had become full-time with benefits. My sister had impressed her new employer enough to get promoted to an account management position. Most importantly, they'd managed the mortgage payment for October without my help. Update 3. I still moved to Seattle, but the circumstances had changed everything. Dad's recovery was progressing well, and the forced restructuring of their finances had actually put them in a better position than they'd been in years. Mom loved her job and had started talking about career goals for the first time since I was a child. My sister was thriving in her new role and had moved into her own apartment. The family group chat, which had been silent for months after our confrontation, started up again with updates on Dad's health and sister's work achievements. But the tone was different now, less demanding, more respectful of boundaries. 6 months into my Seattle position, I received an unexpected call from Dad. He wanted to let me know they'd refinanced the mortgage at a lower rate and would be able to manage payments comfortably with their combined incomes. He also wanted to discuss something else. He and my sister had been talking about starting their own business together, a construction company specializing in eco-friendly renovations. They'd identified a gap in the Seattle market for sustainable building practices and wondered if I'd be interested in advising them on the business plan, given my project management experience. The conversation was different from any we'd had before. Instead of asking for money or demanding my time, they were proposing a partnership based on mutual skills and interests. They'd handle the construction and marketing. I'd provide strategic planning and help them navigate environmental regulations I'd learned about through my renewable energy work. I agreed to review their business plan, and what I saw impressed me. My sister had researched market opportunities, competitive analysis, and financial projections with the same intensity she'd once devoted to avoiding responsibility. Dad had identified specific certification programs and training that would position them as specialists in green construction. 9 months after that terrible promotion dinner, I found myself back in my hometown for a very different kind of family celebration. Dad and sister's business had landed their first major contract, renovating a historic building into energy-efficient condos. Mom had been promoted to assistant manager at her store, and I'd been selected to lead a sustainability initiative that would bring me back to the area frequently for the next 2 years. We met at Romano's, the same restaurant where I'd eaten alone that night in September. This time, all 4 chairs were occupied, and the conversation centered on everyone's professional achievements and future plans. My sister raised her glass to toast the night everything changed, acknowledging that my walking away from their dysfunction had forced everyone to grow up and take responsibility for their own lives. Dad admitted he'd been enabling both himself and my sister by accepting my financial support instead of making hard choices about their lifestyle and spending. He said the heart attack had been a wake-up call, but my boundary setting had been the real catalyst for change. Mom talked about how getting a job had restored her confidence and sense of purpose, and how she'd realized she'd been using family drama as a substitute for her own goals and interests. Looking around that table, I realized that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is refuse to enable their dependence on you. Walking away from their financial crisis had forced everyone to discover capabilities they'd forgotten they had. The mortgage payments I'd been making for 2 years hadn't helped them. They'd just delayed the reckoning that eventually made everyone stronger and more self-sufficient. As we left the restaurant that night, Dad handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $52,000, full repayment of everything I'd contributed over the years, plus interest. But more than the money, what mattered was the note attached. Thank you for loving us enough to let us figure it out. Sometimes the best revenge is refusing to be taken for granted, and the sweetest victory is watching the people you love discover they're capable of so much more than they thought possible.